Welcome back to the Kirby on Sports podcast YouTube page. A very big exclusive interview coming up next. My interview with the radio voice of the JMU Dukes, Dave Riggert. We'll get his thoughts on anything and everything JMU sports, so on and so forth. So after this, my interview with the radio voice of the JMU Dukes, Dave Riggert. But first, thanks to our sponsors, PM Plus Reserve, Shenandoah Primitives, Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation, Mark Francis with Icon Real Estate, and Barrett Pest and Termite Services. We travel virtually down Interstate 81, an hour south from this podcasting location, to speak to the radio voice of the JMU Dukes, Dave Riggert, back in 2021, making his entrance to JMU after 20 years in broadcasting in Missouri and Kansas. He has 4 broadcasting honors from the Missouri Broadcasters Association in 2010, 13, 16, and 18. And he also has the Oscar Stauffer Kansas Sportscaster of the Year Award in 2006. My honor and pleasure to bring on the voice of the JMU Dukes, Dave Riggert, my friend. How are you?
Josh, man, I appreciate you, buddy. I'm doing well. How are you?
It's very great to see you. I'm doing well. I'm glad we could get this set up. I mean, how's everything treating you down there at JMU so far?
It's been a great season so far, not just for me, but for the teams and everything like that. Obviously, football was fantastic this year, going 8-3 in their first year at the FBS level. Men's basketball is off to a good start. Women's basketball is playing well, but even the spring sports did really well, with volleyball making the NCAA tournament. The soccer teams getting to the championship of the Sun Belt tournaments in their first year in the Sun Belt. So it's been a great year down here. So far, so good in the transition to the Sun Belt, but it's been a blast for me, certainly covering all these teams.
Yeah, so usually where I like to start with this, the first thing I always do, well, how did Dave Riggert get into the broadcasting world? Because the career, you've been everywhere, the Midwest, and then coming out to here. Tell us how it all started.
Well, I grew up in a small town in Nebraska, and never had thoughts and dreams of being a broadcaster or anything like that. Just kind of went with the flow. Didn't know what I was going to do. I got a scholarship to do track and field at the University of Nebraska, so went there to do that. And my brother was an insurance guy. My dad was a banker. So when I went to school, I'm like, business administration. I'll figure something out. Whatever. And took some classes, and I'm like, I don't know that this is for me. So I actually, there was somebody from my hometown was a senior at Nebraska when I was there, and they're just like, "Have you ever thought of staying in sports, maybe doing some sports broadcasting or something like that?" And at the time, I really hadn't. But then he was taking some classes and teaching some classes, so I took a few classes and really enjoyed it and fell in love with it. And then there was a student radio station, and I got to do some stuff there. I interned at the local radio station in Lincoln. That was the flagship station for the Nebraska game. So I got to be the producer for like the Nebraska football and basketball games and stuff like that. And then got my feet wet doing some high school games in Lincoln. And then got a job out of college. I did some radio and TV when I was in college, taking different classes, and trying to kind of figure out what path I wanted to go. And, I fell in love with radio and just how you can paint the picture for the listeners. They can certainly see the picture on TV. You don't have to be as in-depth and dramatic and everything like that. And I fell in love with the medium of radio and just how you can paint that picture. And then a guy at the station was able to hook me up with a job in Salina, Kansas when I started there and did some high school stuff, got into some sales to see that side of it and everything. And got to do some Kansas Wesleyan games, which is an NAIA college. And then in 2010, or 2009, I guess, I got a call from St. Joe, Missouri. The Kansas City Chiefs, who are just about an hour south from St. Joe, they were going to bring their summer training camp back to Missouri. It had been in Wisconsin. And so they brought that back, and they were trying to beef up one of the stations in St. Joe to be an all sports station. So they kind of recruited me to take that station over. And then eventually I got to do the Missouri Western games, which is a Division II school in a really good conference in the Midwest. So I got to do that and did that for about 10 years. And then kind of strange timing a year ago, but a little over about a year and a half ago now. Strange timing right before the football season last year. The JMU job was coming open. Dave Thomas took a job down in North Carolina near his hometown to go back with family and stuff. And right place, right time, I guess. It worked out. I'd been kind of looking for something to make that next step to a Division I school. And then JMU happened. And fortunately, I was able to get the job, and it's been a blast ever since.
Yeah, I was reading into that how it was so soon where Thomas accepted the job, and I was reading that he actually had to call the first two games until they could find you eventually to take this. Most recently, you were at Missouri Western before the JMU job. So, can you sort of touch on what your experience was like there at Missouri Western and moving to JMU? What was that whole process like, moving from Missouri all the way to JMU?
It was a whirlwind. There's no doubt about that, because certainly I love my time at Missouri Western. They had great coaches and athletes, and really loved that place. It'll be near and dear to my heart for a long time. But was looking for that next step and trying to be a Division I broadcaster and get to ultimate goal of doing that. So was looking here and there, and this business is so hard to break into and take that next step. If you're in a good gig at the Division I level, you're going to try and stay there as long as you possibly can. So the jobs don't come open very often, and you got to be fortunate. And luckily, this one worked out. But I was always looking, and then all of a sudden, I think it was like, I want to say it was the middle of August, like the 15th or something like that, and I get an email that they're looking for somebody for the JMU job. And as I looked into it a little bit more, I saw that it also had an element of being the sports director at a radio station, which that's what I had been doing for almost 20 years anyway. So I was just like, well, that might give me a leg up, just because even though it is the voice of the JMU Dukes, it's not just that. There's so much
Yeah.
more to it than just being the voice of the Dukes. And so when I saw that, I'm like, well, actually, this is essentially what I was doing for 20 years. So I might have a pretty good leg up. They've got to turn this around in a hurry, because the season starts in about 2 weeks. So I put my resume in and did all that, my demo, and didn't hear anything for about a week. I think it was exactly a week later, I got an email from Kim Mitchell, who's the GM at Harrisonburg Radio Group, saying, "Hey, would you be able to Zoom this afternoon?" And I think I was probably dressed like I am right now. And I'm like, yeah, I can meet whenever you want. Let's Zoom. So I go home, I shower quick, do my hair, put a suit on, to look presentable, and do a quick Zoom. But then it happened in a hurry after that, because I believe that Zoom meeting was a week and a half before the first football game. So I was getting prepared for games at Missouri Western. JMU was getting ready for their games. So it was awkward timing. And then when I talked with them, they're like, well, Dave Thomas has decided to do the first two games for us. We want to make this happen in a hurry. And then hopefully whoever gets the job would take over at game 3. And so I did the Zoom and heard back about 2 days later, and the process started rolling after that. So it was a week before the first game when I had a pretty good idea that I was probably going to be the guy, and then officially got offered the Monday of the week of the first game. And then it got announced, I think, the Friday of the first game. And so I had to turn things around real quick, because especially at that time of year, that's not usually when these jobs open up. And so you think it's going to happen after the basketball season, early in the spring, early summer. So I had to try and get the house. I mean, I did not. I should clarify. I jumped on board right away. I told them I could be out there. So my wife, she she goes, let's do this. You go out there right now. You drive out there. You find a place to live. I'll take care of the kids. I'll take care of the house. We'll sell it. So they stayed back in Missouri. I drove out. I did a game on a Thursday night. My last Missouri Western game was on a Thursday night. I woke up the next morning, left at 8 a.m. and got to Harrisonburg at 12:30 that night, or
Oh
12:30
my.
Saturday morning. So I drove about 15, 16 and a half hours on that Friday to be there for the first game, to see it, their second game of the year. Then I could see kind of how the broadcast worked and operated and everything like that. So I drove out. Within 2 weeks, when I had the Zoom call, I was in Harrisonburg getting ready for all this and trying to figure it all
Wow.
out. The rest of my family was back in Missouri trying to get all that figured out. So God bless them for able to be able to do everything. And then they joined me in January after I was there for about 5 or 6 months. But it was a whirlwind. There was no doubt. And then my first game, I drove halfway across the country to get out to Virginia. And then my first game, we flew across the country to Weber and go play in Ogden, Utah. My first game. So it was the whirlwind. There was no doubt.
Well, that must have been like sort of double prep for you if you were doing Missouri Western and getting ready for JMU too. I would imagine a lot of the crunch time, looking at stats, making sure you're getting everything 100% for those games. What was it like? You said you were there just watching the second game. Were they there because Dave Thomas, he was there for 2 games? Was he sort of there to help you out if you had any questions to make sure this was like a seamless transition?
No question. And that's one thing where um, he and Clint Estes, who was the color guy at the time, both reached out to me as soon as I was offered the job, and people found out that I was going to be the guy. They both reached out to me, so it was a seamless transition because they helped to make it seamless. And you talk about the prep work and everything like that. When I was going after the job, I kind of looked into their stuff and started to do kind of some of my prep work just in case. And I sent that to them to say, hey, here's kind of what I do with everything. And so I was trying to prep a little bit ahead when the job opened up, so I wouldn't have to scramble as much later in the process. But yeah, to kind of go back around, is Dave Thomas was outstanding in helping me through this. And that's one of the reasons that when he and I talked with Clint Estes, I wanted to get out there for that second game if I could, just to see the equipment, because it was different than what I was used to see how the broadcast works, and see how pregame is and halftime and everything like that. And they were open. If I ever had a question, could certainly talk to them, and they helped make it seamless. There's no doubt.
So, along with being the voice of JMU Dukes, like you said, you are the sports director, and I believe you still run an afternoon sports slot on ESPN Radio. So, must be very cool on that end. I got an opportunity via your SoundCloud to listen to some of your interviews. Obviously, more JMU based since you're in the Harrisonburg area, but spotlighting some of the other schools as well. So, good opportunity to. Like recently, you interviewed JMU's volleyball coach, who's in the postseason for college volleyball, and other interviews like that. So a chance to spotlight some of the other sports through your director role at ESPN Harrisonburg.
No question. And that's one thing that's exciting for me too, because I get to work with Bridgewater College and Eastern Mennonite University are two Division III schools. One's in Harrisonburg, EMU is, and Bridgewater is just 5 minutes outside of Harrisonburg. So with JMU being who they are and what they are, they do overshadow Bridgewater and EMU and the high schools. But that's why this platform, with my talk show and the radio station, gives a different outlet to those places where we can, because with all the Bridgewater and EMU coaches, I talk with them each week and put them on my show and get them some coverage and everything, and just let people know what's going on there, and talk to some of the high school coaches for football and basketball, and do that. So it gives me a chance to really kind of get to know the community even more, not just JMU, but the Harrisonburg and Bridgewater College, EMU, the high schools, and get as many people as much coverage as we can, because JMU does overshadow a lot of it, but there's so many great stories and great coaches and great athletes that you want to highlight those things too. So it's a great platform for that. As you mentioned, it is a lot. There's a lot of JMU on it, but there's also a lot of Bridgewater, EMU, and high school stuff too that needs to be out there, and should and deserves a lot of recognition also.
Absolutely. Okay, Dave, I'm going to ask you a loaded question here. Very loaded because you're from Harrisonburg. When you and the family all got settled in Harrisonburg, how long did it take before you tried the best restaurant in the Valley, Cookout?
It didn't take long, actually, and that is now actually one of my favorite places. There
Oh,
aren't
wow.
cookouts in the Midwest, so I didn't know what that was all about. But honestly, the first time I had cookout, um, I think on a men's basketball trip, if women do this too, if they get a road win somewhere, wherever they're playing, they usually stop for milkshakes after a road win. On the team bus, they'll call ahead and get everybody's order and get milkshakes from Cookout. But that's my experience with Cookout. And then obviously we do have one in Harrisonburg, so that's one of my go tos. There's no doubt. It didn't take long for me to figure that one out.
Oh, yeah, because for me, I'd always go down because all my friends went to JMU. Beautiful place, beautiful campus, 100%. And before where I'm stationed here in Winchester, they recently got a cookout. So before then, every time I was in Harrisonburg, I'm getting a cookout tray and a milkshake, taking it back. But now, not anymore because I have one 10 minutes up the road. So, I mean, just the cookout story. I'll tell you, we had Steve Buckhantz, JMU legend, former voice of the Wizards. Cookout was before his time at JMU. So,
Well,
so
for now.
oh yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, Dave, you covered the football season. Obviously, JMU moving up to the Sun Belt. I remember we were talking with Kurt Dudley this time last year, just as JMU made their transition into the Sun Belt. No games were played yet, but what was it like for you covering this team in seeing JMU's performance in the transition to the Sun Belt?
It was honestly, this was one of my most entertaining and just amazing seasons that I've had to cover, just because with the jump up, the expectations were just they were really unknown. Well, I think from the outside there weren't a ton of expectations. I think JMU Nation probably had too high of expectations. That's kind of what fan bases do. They think that your team is going to go into whatever league and be the best and win every game and do that. But to be real, I thought this team would probably win four, maybe five games in their first year. I just didn't know how. And I'll be honest, they lost a lot of good players off of last year's team. The Mike Greens, the Ethan Ratke, one of the best kickers ever to do it at the college football level. Antoine Wells and Diamante Tucker Dorsey transferred in the offseason. Cole Johnson was a record setting quarterback. I mean, you can go down the list. They just didn't have a ton of experience back. And you didn't know how the transfer quarterback Todd Centeo was going to play, and so and you look at these teams, and you could get away with maybe not playing your A game when you were in the CAA or at the FCS level, but in the Sun Belt with the teams now that they're going to play on a weekly basis, you have to bring it every single week, and we saw that a little bit in the middle of the season when they had some injuries and lost three consecutive games. But the one thing that really stood out this year is just how connected this team was, how close they were, and you don't have to have the most talented kids if you're connected on the field and play for one another. And these guys were so connected and so willing to just sacrifice to do whatever needed to be done to make it a good football team. And then obviously Todd Centeo played phenomenal the entire year. The offensive line was better than it was a year ago because they had more experience, so they could be more balanced. The defense exceeded many people's expectations. When you lose your top two linebackers, two of your best defensive linemen, your top two corners, one of your I mean when you lose that many guys, and then they led the FBS in run defense. I mean, teams did not. There were a couple games that teams got loose a little bit and ran the football, but for the most part, this team was just dominant on defense against the run. They led the entire country in rush defense, which is amazing that they were able to do that in year one of the FBS. So this team, and there's just so many good guys on this team. That's what I think made it most special. You get when you're in my position, fortunately, you get to meet the guys and get to know them and kind of get to know their backgrounds and stories and everything like that. And there's so many awesome guys. I mean, it's just you just root for them, and some people have asked me, you get really excited during these games and this and that, and is that fake? I mean, are you faking your enthusiasm? And I'm just like, no, it's 100% real, because you get to know these coaches and players, and man, you're their biggest fan. You want them to do so well, and when they do, it's just so special. And there's so many good guys. They were so connected, and they exceeded, I think, everybody's expectations.
I think it's just bad that they're not eligible for the postseason due to this jump, which I know conferences have rules and stuff like that, but this team looked pretty good enough to make it into what I think it's a bowl now, I guess, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, what could have happened? I mean, they should have been playing last weekend in the Sun Belt Championship game.
Yeah, but it was Troy beating Coastal.
Yeah, Coastal Carolina got there because they essentially had the second best record because we couldn't go, or JMU couldn't go. So it's too bad. I guess I understand why it's in place, because most programs aren't JMU when they try and make the jump, and the NCAA wants teams, if they're going to be serious about football and make the jump from FCS to FBS, they want to make sure you have all your ducks in a row when you have everything ready to make that jump. And for teams that are already ready, for teams that have a pretty substantial athletic budget, I don't know that this rule needs to be in place anymore. It's a little archaic, and heck, Georgia Southern, when they made the transition, they were 8-0 their first year in the Sun Belt. So JMU's not the only team that wasn't able to play for a championship. It's just too bad that it isn't changed. And if you're good enough, you're good enough, in my opinion. I mean, I know these rules are in place for a reason, but if you're good enough to beat these teams in your first year and play for a championship and go to a bowl game, then reward that team, and let them do that. So it is what it is, and we all knew that going into the season, that there was going to be no chance at a championship at bowl game. So I mean, we all knew that, so you can't be too upset about it. But boy, the what ifs. This team could have maybe won a Sun Belt championship this past week if they could have beat Troy, or at least finished second. And then no matter what happened in that game, they're preparing for another one. They're going to a bowl game somewhere here in the next few weeks. But unfortunately, they're not, and hopefully they'll get a jump start on recruiting. It seems like it's going really well so far. So that's just the reality of it. And hopefully it's only a 1-year thing. Normally it's a 2-year transition. JMU's trying to make it only a 1-year transition because they played a full FBS schedule in year one. So that'll be down the line to see if that's going to happen. But that's the hope anyway.
Across the board with this transition, I'm not sure how it pans out with other sports. JMU sports in general just seems to always do very, very well.
They do, and that's part of just JMU cares about athletics. I mean, some athletic programs, they want the enrollment. They want students coming to your school. They just want to have teams to be able to do that. JMU's not that case, and the Sun Belt's not that case. I mean, most teams aren't, but there are some of those. They care about athletics. They want them to succeed. Jeff Bourne does a great job. He's the athletic director at James Madison, and he does it the right way. And President Alger cares about it. You have to have an entire university caring about athletics if you want to be good. And fortunately, JMU does. They have people all across campus that care about athletics. They know the importance of athletics to the university overall as a whole and what it can bring to a university. So they're on board with that. And it's, that's never going to change. There's a high standard at JMU to be competitive in every single sport, and if you're not getting it done, there's going to be a change, until they can get it right. They care about athletics too much here, and they want all the success in the world, and they have great people in place to make that happen. And I mentioned their athletic budget; it's one of the highest already in the Sun Belt, and that's coming in their first year at the FCS level in football. So they do a great job here with everything and facilities and getting the right coaches and the right players. It's top notch. There's no doubt.
So transitioning from football to basketball is in full swing. It must be nice calling games, Dave, in that brand new Atlantic Union Bank Center over there. Beautiful facility right there.
It is amazing. The first time I walked into it, and I had been into living in the Midwest. We went to a lot of Big 12 arenas and Big 12 schools, and a lot of those. Some SEC with Missouri now in the SEC, but this was like a mini big time arena. They did it right. It's about 8,500 or so, and that's almost perfect for what James Madison is. You don't need the 15 to 20,000 seat stadium. You're probably not or arena. You're not going to fill that up. This is the right size for the size of school that JMU is. So that's the one thing that I noticed right away, that it's the perfect size, but it looks like a big time arena. It feels like a big time arena. When you're on the court, when I'm doing a game courtside, you kind of look around and take it all in, that, man, this is big time here. And it's going to do nothing but help the programs, because I think it'll lure recruits that certainly will not deter them by any stretch. And they did well at the Convo Center and did all that, had some great times. But this is a special place. And I think with the coaches that they've got, and Coach O'Regan for the women and Coach Byington for the men, I think basketball, it's good right now. I think it's just going to continue to get better and better. And I think both these teams will compete for Sun Belt championships and trips to the NCAA tournament every single season.
I'm going to correct you there. You said it wouldn't get filled, but it's not going to get filled except for the case last year where it was filled and JMU upset UVA.
Well,
you were on the call for that, right?
Yeah, I was. I said it wouldn't get filled if it was 15,000 or 20,000. It will. There's no doubt. But yeah, the UVA game was fun. Obviously, that was jam packed. There were some Cavalier fans in there as well, but there were fans like jumping over me to get onto the court after the game as they were. So I'm trying to protect the equipment and do all that. But that was the first basketball game where I had that was just the big time feel. I mean, you were playing an state ACC rival. I mean, it had that big time feel to it. And fortunately, this year we got to go to Carolina earlier this year. They're getting set to take on UVA again, who's ranked third in the country. So those are special games when they get a chance to play those teams from the ACC or other big time conferences.
It sort of puts JMU more on the map with a big win like that. Obviously they didn't beat Carolina, but they're playing these bigger ACC schools, which if they can come out with another upset or two, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but who knows? Anything can happen in basketball. It puts JMU on the map so much more.
Oh, no question. There's no doubt. Wins like that will certainly get people's attention. It was on Sports Center for a long time, and there was a lot of talk about it. Heck, there's still a lot of talk about it right now since they're getting ready to play. That was the first time ever that they beat Virginia. So it was a really big deal for JMU to get that victory last year. And even though they didn't beat Carolina, to go down there and play North Carolina, if they would go play a Duke at some point in time. I mean, when football went and played Louisville earlier this year, that was a big deal. So to go play the Power 5 schools and compete with them and sometimes get wins. And that's one thing that JMU's done over the years, is get wins over Power 5 schools, even when they were in the FCS from football. But JMU basketball's had some big wins. And that was a huge one last year and you're right, it definitely can put them on the map and give them recognition, and that a win like that can help in the NCAA tournament and all that down the road. So they're big games. I don't know that they're must wins, but if you win it, boy, there's a lot of great things that can come from it.
Oh, yeah. And going back to that game even more, it was a national game, nationally televised. So everything was thrown off in terms of the time of the event and everything. And I'm sure the commercial breaks were longer. So it must have been different from the normal routine in a way.
Yeah, it was, no doubt. Everything's a little bit different. You're right. The breaks are a little bit longer when it's on national TV, but it puts more of a spotlight on it. And I still want people to turn that national TV down and listen to the radio, but you can sync that up and do that. But just to get them on national TV and to be on ESPN Plus now, I mean, that's a huge advantage for JMU to have all their games on ESPN Plus instead of Flow Sports like it was before. It's just so much more accessible. So many more people have it. Just easier to get onto. And then when you're playing teams like that, when they play UVA, they're going to be on ACC Network, so that's a national televised game too. So it puts a brighter spotlight on JMU, and that's always a good thing.
Once again, the voice of the JMU Dukes for football and basketball, Dave Riggert. Dave, before we let you go, I'm going to give the floor to you. Where can our listeners listen to your broadcasts and your radio show?
Well, my radio show is locally in the Valley on ESPN Harrisonburg, 1360 AM and 106.9 FM. Unfortunately, we don't have that stream, but I put out the interviews on my SoundCloud account, the ESPN Harrisonburg SoundCloud account, so you can just search that and listen to all the interviews from the show on there. And then for the games, it's on WSVA, which is 5:50 a.m. and that's and 92.1 FM is the FM signal, so you can listen to that or WSVAonline.com. One thing that's been pretty new that we're Learfield's school is that Learfield has an app. It's the Varsity Network app, and you can go on there. It's free to download, and you can listen to and almost every broadcast network across the country at the college level is a Learfield property. And since we are, all of our men's and women's basketball games, football games are on that app. And you can go to that app, the Varsity Network app, and search JMU, and you can click right there, and there's the game. And you can do that with any school around the country. So it's really, if you're driving and want to find a game, go to the Varsity Network app, and that's where all the JMU games are as well. But pretty easy. You can find us worldwide wherever you can, and listen to the Dukes, no doubt.
Dave, it was a great pleasure having you on this exclusive. Big thanks to our sponsors as well. And Dave, it was a lot of fun chopping it up with you about JMU sports. I hope we can do it again really soon, my friend.
Anytime, Josh. I appreciate you, my man. We'll talk soon.